Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Rausen Pereira. A bill that bars commercial surrogacy and allows only close relatives to act as surrogates to needy infertile couples for altruistic reasons was passed by the Lok Sabha on Wednesday, with Health Minister JP Nadda terming the proposed legislation historic. The surrogacy regulation bill was passed after an hour-long debate amid noisy protests by Congress and AIADMK members over various issues. The Health Minister said different sections of society, political parties, the Supreme Court and the Law Commission have spoken against commercial surrogacy and that the bill addresses these concerns. India had become a hub of commercial surrogacy and surrogate mothers also suffered from exploitation, the Health Minister told the House. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyze the Surrogacy Regulation Bill of 2018. Joining me on the program today are Chakshu Roy, Head Outreach PRS Legislative Research, Shivani Sachdev Gaud, General Secretary, Indian Society for Third-Party Assisted Reproduction, Sunita Oja, Advocate of the Supreme Court, and we are also joined by Aditi, Tandon, Special Correspondent of the Tribune. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. Chakshu Roy, let me begin the program with you. Let's try and first put into perspective the highlights of the bill.
Frank, before I get into the highlights, let me just kind of quickly sum up as to what the journey for this bill has been. The bill has a long history. 2008, there was a Supreme Court judgment which talked about surrogacy. 2009, there was a Law Commission report. It talked about the fact that there was lack of regulation for surrogacy in the country. And this lack of regulation could lead to exploitation of surrogate mothers. 2015, the government came out with some set of regulations for regulating surrogacy. In 2016, we had the bill that was introduced in the Lok Sabha. The bill was then referred to a parliamentary standing committee which scrutinized the bill, and in 2018, now the bill has been passed by Lok Sabha. To give you a broad overarching highlight, and maybe we can go into the details later on, as you pointed out in your opening remarks, it prohibits commercial surrogacy and allows for altruistic surrogacy, but only from surrogate mothers who are close relative of the intending couple. It also lays down a few more conditions. One of the conditions is that the intending parents, the reason that they want a surrogate child is because of infertility of either of the couples. It prescribes an age limit. So I think it's 55 for men and 50 for women for the intending parents. And for surrogate mothers, it says that the age limit for a surrogate mother should be between 25 to 35. She should have had a child of her own, a close relative, and she should have gone through a psychological test which would deem her fit. Now, the surrogate procedure can only be done in authorized clinics, which the central government and state government authorities will certify. And lastly, there would be some kind of insurance provisions for, the surrogate mother to take care of her benefit and well-being, and that no amount other than, the expenses related to the surrogacy or for insurance would be paid to the surrogate mother.
Shivani Gaur, surrogacy has historically been a big problem really as far as India is concerned. How will this bill help going forward?
Well, I'm not sure, Frank, that I would agree that surrogacy has been a problem. The condition of infertility which leads to a couple needing to do surrogacy is the problem, not the process of surrogacy actually. In India, we do about 1,80,000 IVF cycles in a year. Out of that, 5% are such people who cannot, the woman has a problem with her uterus, she cannot carry a pregnancy. In such cases, the only option which is left to this woman is that she should have a surrogate pregnancy. Now, the bill states that either proven infertility in either men or women. Now, what should be clarified is male infertility does not need surrogacy. It is only female infertility where you need surrogacy. And also, if you are sitting in a clinic, like I am sitting in the clinic today, 99% of my patients do not have any such suitable relative who is going to be ready to carry the pregnancy for them. In fact, people do not even tell that they are infertile in their family. because infertility itself is such a condition that people do not want to discuss it. Secondly, the suitability, like the criteria are so strict that what the medical community feels today is that it is not going to be a regulation, but in effect surrogacy is going to be stopped in India, because there is not even 1% of couples who are going to be able to find such a close relative within that age criteria with only one attempt at the surrogacy process of embryo transfer. These conditions are very, very difficult to meet, and most of the couples, they are going to resort to alternative methods. For example, many people that I have spoken to today have told me they will be traveling abroad to do surrogacy in other countries. Countries like Kenya, Ukraine, USA, they are all open to these couples. So now in effect Indians will become like those foreigners who are traveling abroad to do surrogacy.
All right, and that's something new that we're going to see. Surrogacy tourism is what you're suggesting. Let me bring in Aditi Tandon into the picture. You know, this issue of infertility, Aditi, you know, as far as infertility is concerned, who's going to prove, who's going to ascertain whether a couple is infertile or not?
See, as Chakshu was pointing out earlier in the program, the eligible couple, the intending couple, will have to first be married for 5 years. During these 5 years, they would have had tried all assisted reproductive technology, you know, measures like she was mentioning about IVF and all others, and would have failed. Once this period of 5 years is exhausted and they failed through all other ART methods, that is when the couple becomes eligible for engaging a surrogate under this particular law. The law provides for 3-tier system. It says that at the national level, a national surrogacy board will be set up. This board will basically frame policy. At the state level, there will be state level surrogacy boards, and then also at the state level, there will be appropriate authorities. These appropriate authorities will be actually the authorities where the intending couples will have to apply. And intending couples would have to produce certificates of medical infertility.
So they will have to prove, you know, at all these 3 levels that they are infertile, and that only then can they go forward.
Not at all the 3 levels, but at the level of the appropriate authority, which will be then, you know, going through all the processes, because the intending couple will have to do a lot more also, Frank. The intending couple, for the first time, the law provides for anybody interested in surrogacy would have to sign a parentage order, which really means once the child is born out of a surrogacy arrangement, you cannot abandon that child. One of the reasons why this law was thought to be urgent was that a lot of foreigners, at least 75% of all surrogacy procedures in India were involving foreigners. Let us first get that straight, as one of the gynecologists was pointing out. Foreigners were traveling to India for these purposes. Over the past 4-5 years, Frank, there have been several cases of abuse of Indian surrogacy. In fact, we didn't have any regulation. There was a complete vacuum, and the result was that these foreigners were coming to India. They were commissioning poor women as surrogates. The women were delivering the babies, and there have been several cases. For instance, the last case was of baby Maji in Gujarat, where a surrogate was engaged in Anand, and a Japanese couple had hired this surrogate. The couple divorces in the middle of this surrogacy arrangement and period and refuses to take the child. So there is no legal mechanism to protect the interests of the child born out of surrogacy arrangements. The law obviously was needed. But the concerns that the other experts are raising are also extremely valid.
Right.
We also have to see, Frank, whether the surrogacy law that has been cleared by the Lok Sabha yesterday is in consonance with the other laws in the country.
Absolutely.
For instance, the adoption law allows single women to adopt
Yeah, I want
children.
to come to that as well. I want to come to that as well, and that's why we're going to bring in the lawyer on the program. You know, you've heard both sides of the story, Sunita Oja. As a lawyer, how do you look at this, and what changes really after the bill, you know, passes the Rajya Sabha test as well? Let's not forget there is the Rajya Sabha test as well as far as this bill is concerned.
Frank, as Aditi was pointing out, this area, the intention of the bill was to address and to stop rather commercial use of surrogacy. And this area was completely like there was a vacuum. There was no regulations as such. Now it's a matter of, you know, if you have money, you can go, you can hire a womb, I can hire a surrogate mother, deliver, go through the expensive procedures. And who are at the end, at the receiving end? Women who are in need of money, or who are, as you know, our doctor friend was pointing out, they're not the relatives, people who are there with altruistic motives, but of course people are there either because of the need or to make money, which both in my opinion is an unfortunate circumstance which actually it goes against the very concept of human dignity. Now, talking about the other laws, if you look at the JJ Act has actually adopted adoption as a mode of rehabilitation of children, and there are more than 30,000 children who are actually available as a free for adoption. So therefore, to say that if there are people who want to have kids, they can adopt children. They can go for adoption, which would actually be a far more humanistic and noble way of looking at it. And of course, those who can, whose family, their relatives, etc., who are ready and willing, they can go for surrogacy. But of course, the commercial surrogacy is not allowed. And then India cannot become a place where people come, they hire a mother, use her as a surrogate mother, take a child and go abroad. I think that's just not. That's actually against the constitutional principles of this country, and that was the reason why Supreme Court had pointed out that this is the area which needs regulation, and thankfully we have this regulation now. Yes, there would be teething problem, but there is a lot of scope as far as delegated legislation is concerned. There are authorities who have been who have to still sort of frame rules and regulations with respect to whether the infertility issue is concerned, your eligibility criteria is concerned, etc. So I genuinely hope that those things will be sorted out as the matter.
All right. Chakshu Roy, we've heard several different viewpoints. Let's not forget that this bill has gone through the scrutiny of a standing committee. What were the observations of the standing committee, and were all these aspects really discussed and deliberated upon?
Right. Some of these aspects were discussed in the Parliamentary Standing Committee, and based on these discussions, the government moved certain amendments in the House yesterday. One part of the amendment was as to how do you ensure that the PNDT Act, loosely referred to as the sex selection part of it, that should not happen in the process of surrogacy. So that has been taken care of in the amendments. The other thing that's been taken care of in the amendments is, the choice to the surrogate mother about backing out of the surrogacy, if she so decides. So, that has been incorporated. The other thing that has been incorporated, as I mentioned at the beginning of the program, is a longer insurance period for the surrogate mother. But there are still some things that, would possibly be useful for members of parliament to debate in the House. And, we have lawyers on the panel, we have lawyers and doctors on the panel who can talk about this. The definition of infertility, which makes you eligible as a surrogate parent, there is very often a possibility that a woman is able to conceive but not carry a child, right? Now, that would not, because she's able to conceive, it will not fall under the definition of fertility. And that's just one example. There could be multiple reasons as to why, a woman is not able to, continue with a pregnancy. Now, should that be taken into account? That's one part of the thing, that should possibly, be debated. The other part is, the concept of close relative when it comes to surrogacy. Now, medical studies have shown that if the close relative is going to be from the father's side, then it could potentially result in, abnormalities in the child, that would happen.
Right.
So very often, maybe my co-panelist, who's a lawyer, could point out that in the Hindu Marriage Act, there's this concept of, that you should not be marrying within 7 degrees of, of your lineage. Now, those are two important issues that should be thought about when we are thinking about surrogacy. All
right. Since we are here, Shivani Gaur, what aspects do you believe have been, the bill has failed to address really as far as surrogacy is concerned?
As you are talking about the 5-year period of waiting, you should be aware that there are women who are born without a uterus, or there are women who are born with severely malformed uterines. There are a few thousand cases in our country every year, and for these women, whether you wait for 5 years, actually it puts an additional strain, because it's not that they are going to suddenly develop a uterus in those 5 years. So for them, this concept of 5 years does not apply. And secondly, as you are talking that it shouldn't be on the father's side, actually there is a confusion here. What is the relation in the family refers to the genetics. So in this case, the baby that is put in the surrogate mother is not genetically related to the woman who is carrying the pregnancy. She is carrying the pregnancy of another person. So if you are carrying the pregnancy in your family for a relative, that is not going to introduce genetic abnormalities inside the child. Understand that. That is a different concept. The embryo conceived is different and the woman carrying. But my point is that before this is done, if you actually do a study that how many of these couples who are coming for surrogacy actually have somebody who is eligible like this to be able to carry a pregnancy for them. If you find that out, you will realize that the number is less than 5%. So what is the solution for 95%? And as ma'am has pointed out, adoption is a very noble thing, and we strongly believe that everybody, why should the burden be on infertile couples? Everybody should consider adoption. It is such a noble act. And as far as exploitation of the surrogate mothers is concerned, again I would like to point out the Joint Parliamentary Committee interviewed surrogate mothers. I was fortunate enough to be involved in that as the secretary of the society, and the surrogate mothers personally went and interviewed, and the recommendation was that there should be some amount of compensation. They are not for commercial surrogacy, but they were totally for compensated surrogacy. That a woman who can carry the pregnancy should get some form of compensation, because she is giving a part of her life. She's, losing her work or having loss of income. So that compensation has to be done.
Right. All right. Aditi, as far as the bill is concerned, it talks about the constitution of, of a board at a national level, state boards as well. You mentioned them in your opening remark as well. What is the role of these boards really going to be, and how is it going to help?
See, the boards will come into the picture once the Rajya Sabha passes the law and the presidential assent to the law comes. The National Surrogacy Board will frame the broader policy as to how this sector will be regulated. Like our other friends have just pointed out, that those are matters of detail which will be described and specified under the rules of the law. For instance, this whole concern around who the close relative will be, yesterday it was clarified by the Health Minister, Mr. J.P. Nadda, that the definition of close relative is still open. And it is actually the National Surrogacy Board and the State Surrogacy Boards which are going to define the close relative. The lawyer friend was also pointing out, she's right that the matter of detail will be clarified by these three bodies. The appropriate authorities, which we were saying earlier, will invite applications for surrogacy, will also be the first points of contact, Frank, for any violation of the law. They will be allowed to take suo motu cognizance of any contraventions. Now, this law also says that every surrogacy clinic across the country, whether it is in Gangaram Hospital or it is in any other private hospital, needs to be registered with the Indian Council of Medical Research. There will be a registry. Any clinic which is not registered makes itself liable to all sorts of convictions under this particular law. The law provides extremely tough punishments for any contravention, which means if the surrogacy has been entered into, the arrangement has been entered into for say, money has exchanged hands, whereas the permission is only for altruistic surrogacy. Or if a clinic is not registered and is involved in the procedure, then they can invite punishment up to rupees 10 lakh fine and imprisonment up to 10 years. But one particular point that I was really interested in flagging here, I'm sure you will take it up also, is when you said what is it that the Parliamentary Standing Committee said earlier this year about this bill. The Parliamentary Standing Committee said two very important things. The first thing the Parliamentary Standing Committee said was that there are guarantees of reproductive autonomy under the constitution of our country, Frank. It's a matter which is open to interpretation by the courts also. The right to life gives us the right over our bodies to choose how we want to conceive, to decide when we want to get pregnant.
Absolutely.
When you ask a couple to produce a certificate of infertility, there are legal experts and there are human rights experts who can argue that that's gross invasion of an intending couple's privacy. As one of the doctors was pointing out, people don't want to actually disclose their status. Now, there are grey areas around the bill. I was talking about the adoption procedures. Single women, divorced women, are allowed to adopt children in the country, but
Absolutely.
are not allowed to enter into surrogacy arrangements.
That's what I was going to come to. That's what I was going to come to. Sunita Ojha, there are going to be, several, complications, several issues there really as far as dealing with some of the other laws are concerned. For instance, the Hindu Marriage Act of 1955 very clearly states that there can't be any live-in relationships, but the Supreme Court has made it clear as far as live-in relationships are concerned. It has accepted it. On the other hand, the bill states that live-in partners cannot go in for surrogacy. So there are several, issues there.
See, the Supreme Court direction with respect to the live-in relationships is in the context of Domestic Violence Act. That is a protective legislation that is to oust the violence in any form of a relationship. Therefore, the Domestic Violence Act cannot be read into either the Hindu Marriage Act or Hindu Succession Act or Hindu Adoption and Maintenance Act. So that is a different, the purpose, the intent is different. Similarly, here the purpose and intent of the act is to stop commercial surrogacy, which is what the bill is trying to do, that their money cannot change hands for the purpose of, if you want to become a parent, you cannot buy it in market. That is what the commercial surrogacy is. Yes, there are, as far as the adoption is concerned, under the JJ Act, it is not imperative for you to be either married or to prove that you are infertile. Yes, there are other conditions attached to it with respect to your suitability as a parent, that can be done. But to say, yes, the contradiction all that I am seeing is, yes, as a single person you can go for an adoption, but you cannot go for a surrogacy. But the reason I would again I would disagree is because here the purpose of Surrogacy Act is different. The purpose of surrogacy is not to either give the children in adoption or to allow you to have children. The idea is not to go for surrogacy for commercial purposes. So therefore, we are kind of bringing the two things together is unjustified in my opinion.
Okay, all right. Closing comments now from all my guests, starting first with you, Chakshu Roy. We've spoken about the eligibility criteria and what an infertile couple really needs to do to go in for surrogacy. But what about the eligibility criteria for the surrogate mother, and will she be held liable at any point in time?
So I don't think, the question is of liability of the surrogate mother, but the questions definitely would arise of the fact as to, what is the kind of balance that the law is creating vis-a-vis the surrogate mother and the surrogate and the intending parents. And also, what is the kind of recourse that intending parents have in case their eligibility application is rejected? Do they have recourse to an appeal? How long will that appeal take? Does not having a certificate once, work against them? So these are some of the issues that will have to be clarified. Maybe they'll get clarified in the delegated legislation. Maybe they'll get clarified when the bill goes to the Rajya Sabha and, the government replies to the debate there.
All right. Shivani Gaud, the bill also provides for an appropriate authority and registration of surrogacy clinics. That's what the bill states. How important is that?
It's very important, and actually we are all really happy with that, because now officially surrogacy has become legal. There is going to be a legal entire process, and so that stigma which was there that this is illegal procedure, whatever, that is totally gone. So this is actually a very good thing, and it is for the safety of all the people involved, for the patients, for the surrogate mothers, for the clinics. So we are all really happy that the process has become legal. There is going to be a proper legal body and legal authority. But the problem that comes is that the rules within have changed the entire process, that people will not be able to avail the services only.
All right. So
and even for single parents, what about LGBT parents?
Absolutely.
Even single parents, a single father has no choice. A single mother can carry the pregnancy, but single father, how will he have his genetic child? Yesterday there was a single father in the parliament when the bill was being passed, and he came and he met me later and he said he was absolutely devastated.
Okay. You're happy that some kind of a formalization has taken place as far as surrogacy is concerned, but the rules have become even more stringent, is what you're suggesting, and probably that needs a relook. Aditi Tandon, a lot has been said about adoption. Does this make adoption, a far easier process, or maybe will we see more people going in for adoption?
You see, I still remember when Mr. Nadda was introducing the bill in one of the press conferences last year, he said exactly what the lawyer friend is saying, that the bill is intended to discourage surrogacy and to encourage adoptions as the first choice for infertile couples. The intention of the bill is not in doubt, but I have my limited point on reproductive autonomy. I do not know whether this particular law can be challenged in the courts on issues of liberty, on issues of equal rights and rights over your reproductive autonomy. The second thing, Frank, which is extremely important, which we need to debate is whether, see, the law says commercial surrogacy is banned. That's a noble, cause. That should be done. It had become fashionable, almost fashionable over the past 2 years. You had these series of celebrities engaging surrogate women all over. Shah Rukh Khan had a child, Amir Khan announced a child, Karan Johar announced a child, then you had Tushar Kapoor who had a child. So, it had become fashionable. And Mrs. Sushma Swaraj, who headed the group of ministers that drafted the law, made a very valid point when she actually briefed us about the bill for the first time. She said it cannot be, an arrangement for celebrity couples that do not want their wives to undergo labor. It sends a very bad message. So you've banned commercial surrogacy. It's extremely welcome. But what do you do about these disqualified sections? Foreigners should be barred. That's fair enough. Many countries do it. But what about persons of Indian origin? What about overseas citizens of India? What about the LGBT community?
Absolutely.
We are, the legal fraternity. The courts are going progressively on these things.
Yeah, hopefully all these issues will be addressed when the bill is taken up in the Rajya Sabha, and that's why we are having this discussion here. But closing comments from you, Sunita Oja, on talking about adoption going forward. Now, will we have to ease some of our adoption rules, maybe?
Adoptions rules have already been eased out a lot. JJ Act, if you look at in the new form, it has, in fact, the rules also which has been framed, whether it is for a single parent or the lot of, and there's a CARA has been the kind of the regulatory authority that has been set up under the CARA. So adoptions, but yes, the number that is required, the demand that is there is, the children who are available, especially children who are special children, the children with special needs, etc. Those are a lot of children who are there, but they're not people who are willing to take that step forward and give them a happy home. All right. On that note, then, we'll call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. That's it on this edition of The Big Picture. See you again next time.